2022 could be a historic year for China. Xi Jinping is preparing to ask the Communist Party Congress for a third term in office. What will this mean for the rest of the world? And is conflict with America inevitable?
There's a lot to unpack around China, and it can be hard to really understand what's going on. So, Ed, what has 2021 taught you about this man, Xi Jinping's vision for China, and indeed the Communist Party's vision for China, and if they are indeed the same thing?
I see this year as Xi Jinping preparing for the really major event, which is going to come sometime next autumn with a party congress, when he breaks the mold and becomes the first leader since Mao to have a third term. And that could lead to a fourth term. And in order to do this, he not only has to exert his control over the country, but also set out an agenda, a reason, a justification, in fact, for why he needs to have this third 5-year term. And this is, I think, absolutely fascinating, because his agenda is a mix of things that worry us in the West, things like the dominance of consumer tech, the monopoly power of the big tech companies, the way they use data, inequality, the sense that perhaps our children spend too long playing computer games and it's not very good for them. So a lot of these concerns actually are shared between the West and China, but he deals with them in an incredibly authoritarian way, and a way that absolutely centralizes party power. So, for instance, clamping down on the consumer tech companies, destroying, perhaps we reckoned in October, about something like $2 trillion worth of value. You see the aggressive attitude towards anyone who rocks the boat, Peng Shuai, the tennis player, and the treatment of her. So this is an authoritarian way of dealing with a lot of problems that the whole world faces. And I think it's in that kind of mix, it's sort of hugely complex and interesting constellation of forces of authoritarianism and taking on the big problems of society.
And I mean, we'll think and talk a lot about what that means for the rest of the world, but what in practice does that mean for people who live within China's borders?
Well, I think we need to remember that Xi Jinping and the Communist Party are popular in China. Chinese nationalism and pride within China is at an all-time high. The Chinese people feel that they're doing very well in the world. They look at COVID, for example, and they see, the millions of deaths around the world, including in advanced democracies, and they think that their system, strange as it seems to us, of perhaps locking everyone down as soon as a case arises, they see their extraordinarily low death rate as a mark of tremendous success. Now, of course, there are people who are unhappy about this. China has a bad record for arresting journalists. Over 1 million Uyghurs have been through these re-education camps in Xinjiang. So this is not nice for everybody by any means. But I think we'd be kidding ourselves in the West if we thought that the Chinese people see Xi Jinping and the CCP through the same eyes as we do.
Now, Zani, did 2021 sort of mark the death of big private enterprise in China? What's going on? What do you make of that landscape?
No, I don't think it marked the death of big private enterprise, but it definitely marked the very serious clampdown and assertion of party control. And private business serves at the sort of behest of and to further the goals of the party, because it's just extraordinary. The scale of the domestic shift in this year before the National Party, the Communist Party Congress that Ed talked about, the assertion of Xi's power, the clampdown on business, as you say, but also the shift internationally. China is determined, as Xi Jinping says, to move to center stage globally. It's becoming more assertive internationally, even as it's becoming more authoritarian and indeed autocratic at home.
There were hopes that with the move from Trump to Biden, there might be a thawing of relations, but that doesn't really seem to be the case at all. A lot of people quickly jump to the conclusion that this is a new Cold War. Is the current US-China relationship indeed beginning a sort of new Cold War, or is that actually the wrong lens through which to look at what might be happening with this sort of new forming world order?
The original Cold War between the Soviet Union and the West was an ideological struggle between two sort of parts of the world that had remarkably little economically to do with each other. There was very little trade, meaningful trade between the two blocs. What we have between the US and China is something fundamentally different. This is the world's first, biggest and second biggest economy, incredibly interlinked. Modern globalization is sort of built on those linkages. And there are lots and lots of countries, including the fastest growing countries in Asia, that are hugely integrated with the Chinese economy, while also relying on the American security guarantee.
And if you look at the implications of that for Biden, they're rather awkward, because the more he tries to galvanize support at home by kind of banging the drum and calling this a new Cold War, the harder he makes his job of building alliances in Southeast Asia. There are plenty of countries there that look to the United States for their security, but look to China for their prosperity. And if you try and force them to choose, America might just find that they make the choice for China rather than for the United States.
Taiwan comes up a lot as a question, right? So what will ultimately happen?
The status quo here is full of tension and ambiguity and a series of sort of threats that balance each other out. And people are always jostling for position between the Taiwanese government flirting with independence, but not too much, trying to show it does not want to join up with China as it is at the moment, with Xi Jinping and the Chinese government, for whom it is an absolute national priority to acquire Taiwan. And if we're thinking over 20 or 30 years, I think sort of they will try and see that to a close, but over the next decade perhaps not. And then the United States, where what's at stake there is its entire strategic presence in the Pacific. Because the United States does nothing to protect Taiwan, then all its promises to South Korea and Japan are hugely undermined. So this is the knottiest of knotty problems. And when I say status quo, I don't mean to suggest it's going to be easy. But I think the risks for everybody, including Xi Jinping, of moving right now are just too great. So I think it can be managed, but I don't think it's comfortable for anybody.
Understanding what is going on in China, understanding what's happening, where it's going, is the single most important job, frankly, that we have to do, and that it's nothing else is as dramatic, I think, in its consequences for every other big issue in the world. So it's enormously fascinating. It's quite scary in many ways, very difficult to make sense of, not least because it is very, very hard to get a sense of what's going on in China, but nothing could be more important.
Hi, this was part of a digital event produced exclusively for subscribers to The Economist. If you'd like to watch the full discussion of this or of one of our other events, then click the link. You'll just have to register if you haven't already, or you can become an Economist subscriber to enjoy access to all of our journalism. Thanks for watching.